Hello, good morning. Welcome to the Trails Radio Show. Thank you for joining us this evening. Today, my special guest is Mr. Fred Jacobs. Thank you, and join us in a minute.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Good. Yep, I can hear you just fine.
Great. Okay, my first question to you is, how did you get started in the industry? How did your career begin?
Well, I will tell you this. Having been in this industry for more than 40 years, I have asked that same question to a lot of people. And what's amazing is that the answers are all different. So mine is a very different pathway. I came to radio late. At least I thought it was late. I graduated from college, and I still didn't know what I wanted to do. And I entered a master's degree program at Michigan State in TV radio because I kind of thought I wanted to make TV documentaries, but I ended up falling in love with the radio class that they taught there. So I gravitated into that, but I discovered, I don't know, a couple of years in that I didn't feel like I had a good enough voice and I wasn't entertaining enough to be able to make it on the air. And so I shifted my focus to audience research. And I ended up eventually getting a job at an audience research company for radio. It was the only one back in those days in the 70s. And I was lucky enough to get a job there, and that opened a lot of doors to me. And really from there, I was able to join ABC Radio as a researcher and then a programmer, and I was off to the races. But I sort of came in through the back door. Most people come into radio on the air or through sales, and I came in through research.
Yeah, there's many different fields in radio, research, sales, on the air. It's interesting,
Yep. Well, and there's a lot of ways in. I think a lot of people feel like, and when you run into people on the street and they go, "What do you do for a living?" and you say, "Well, I'm in radio," and they say, "Oh, are you on the air?" And it's like, no. As you just said, there are a lot of jobs in radio behind the scenes and everything else, and there are more jobs in radio that aren't on the air than there are on the air. But a lot of people don't understand that.
Yeah, most people these days, if they want to get into radio, they go, right for going on the air. But there's so many different possibilities,
Exactly.
My next question to you is, what is the most challenging part for you being in the industry, personally? What is the most challenging part for you?
Well, I think a lot of it now has to do with the way that the industry is changing and that the media world is changing around it. Back when I got into radio, you only had to really think about the other radio stations in town that you were competing against. And today you're competing against a much bigger field of options, from internet streaming to YouTube to podcasts. And so I think the biggest challenge is working with radio people to convince them that the competitive landscape has gotten much wider and they need to think beyond the AM or the FM dial when it comes to how consumers want to inform and entertain themselves. And for a lot of people, that's a big adjustment, because when they got into radio, it was just station A versus station B, and now it's a lot more complicated than that.
Yeah, the internet, it's constantly changing, the industry, and it's a good thing and it can be a bad thing, but you have to keep up with the technology,
You're exactly right, and I think sometimes people who have been in radio for a long time see the internet as a very difficult challenge, and it is, but it's also a tremendous opportunity to grow your audience and to expose them or to reach a bigger audience and to expose that audience to your personalities and your content and everything else. So it depends on your outlook. I'm the kind of person who sees it as an opportunity and a chance to actually grow our brand. So that's what excites me.
Yeah, and there's always opportunities, always.
More than there used to be, Trey. And it used to be radio was a very small industry, really. There's only so many radio stations licensed by the Federal Communications Commission. But now, with internet radio and podcasting and satellite radio and all these things, there's a lot of different ways to entertain and inform in the audio space that isn't just working at an AM/FM radio station.
Yeah. See, my show's an online podcast, and I talk to people like you, see how they got in the industry, and I've been doing this for 6 years, and I've interviewed over 100 people, So it's amazing.
Well, you were very much ahead of the curve. How did you, 6 years ago, connect the dots? Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
I know you're supposed to ask me questions, but I'm curious. How did you know back in 2013 that this would be a thing and that this could be an outlet for you? How did you know?
Well, at first I had no idea what I was getting into. I didn't have a clue. And I've met some people who were in, the industry way long than I was, like 35 years, they were in. And I was always interested in radio and entertainment, and so I said, well, I'll give it a try, it's interesting, I enjoy watching and listening to it, so why I should do it myself, And with help from professionals that did it way before me, I got the hang of it, and I said, this is really interesting, I was nervous about it, because I never did it before. And for the first...
Well, and I go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off. We have a little delay here. Go ahead.
For the first 2 years on my show, I played music, I played, I spin tracks, as a disc jockey, and after that I started interviewing people, and that was a good, interesting change, but I stuck with interviewing people because that kept me busy more, and it was interesting, because you get to hear these stories, and they, like you said earlier in our interview, there's always different answers, to my questions.
Yes. I would imagine that you learn a little something from everybody that you interview, which is really the beauty of it. Well, good for you.
Thank you. My next question to you is, do you have any upcoming projects? Are you keeping busy? Do you have any upcoming?
Oh, I always have upcoming projects. I'm busier today. My company now, so I have a consulting company, and there's also a mobile apps development company, mostly for radio. But the consulting company turns 36 years old this year, which ended up being a lot more durable than I could have ever imagined all those many years ago. But I would say, Trey, that we are busier today than we've ever been, and I think that's due to a lot of reasons. The economy is good, and I think a lot of people in radio now are really taking up the challenge that they have to kind of rethink everything and learn how to do tricks, right? Like podcasting or video or social media or those kinds of things. So a company like mine can provide a lot of different help and assistance depending on what's going on. So yeah, we do a lot of things. We work for commercial radio stations and companies. We work for public radio like NPR. We work for Christian radio. We do audience research in all these areas. So we really have more going on today than we did when I first got the company going, and we were just consulting rock and roll radio stations. So it's a lot more interesting. The hard part is that I'm getting older, and I travel all the time. I'm on the road 40 weeks a year. So the travel kind of takes its toll. You know, it's a little harder to bounce back from a road trip than it used to be. But I really enjoy what I'm doing, and I'm having fun. So it's all good.
Yeah, and that's the main important part. You know, having fun and enjoying it. You know.
Well, you know, there are other fields to get into if you want to make more money. But I think if you talk to most people in the radio business, no matter when they got in, whether it was last week or like me 4 decades ago, most people got into radio because they loved it, you know, and they enjoyed it, and it was fun. And while the business has changed and some people think it's not as much fun as it used to be, I think you have to find your fun. And I think, I mean, I have a lot of friends who are CPAs and dentists and lawyers, and I'm not going to say they're not having fun, but I think I'm having more fun than they are. So this is still a fun business to be in.
Oh, yeah. And it's constantly changing. You know, the industry is constantly growing and stuff.
No, you're right. You know, I was a program director of a radio station back in the 70s and early 80s, and nothing much changed. You know, I mean, it was sort of the same year after year. I mean, I remember when compact discs came out and they eventually replaced the turntables in the Air Studio. But really, outside of that, there really wasn't a great deal of change. And today, I mean, every week there's something new going on. There's a new app, or there's a new social media platform, or there's something happening. And I think everybody in radio today really needs to work hard to try and keep up with all the changes, because it's, as you said, it's moving really fast.
Yeah. My last question to you is, what is your advice to people who want to get into radio, who want to get into the industry? What is your advice to people?
So clearly work hard. You know, there's no getting around the fact that, especially if you're trying to break in, you might have to make some sacrifices. You might have to intern for a radio station or a company, and maybe not get paid very much or not get paid at all. But I think that's sort of part of paying your dues. Mm-hmm. And pretty much everybody has to go through kind of an initiation period like that. So I think that's important. I think education is critically important. A lot of people in radio, you know, got in when they were teenagers and sort of skipped the higher education part. But I think, you know, those kinds of skills, learning how to write, learning how to communicate, and learning how, you know, to present your ideas and sell yourself is very important. And then the last thing I would say, and this was something that I had to figure out the hard way, because I tended to be very, very shy, and I would go to conventions and I would not put myself out there. You know, I would kind of hang out in my room, and I was a little afraid to walk around and introduce myself to people. But I eventually learned the value of networking and meeting people and engaging people and introducing them to me. And I think the more people you meet, especially if you are talented and you're a hard worker, the more doors that can open for you. So I would strongly recommend networking. And you know, the good news is that social media can really help you there, especially a platform like LinkedIn and that type of thing. But there's nothing like